Hi everyone. Sometimes a routine data check reveals something that clearly does not belong where it appears. This video is made to help you relax, slow down, and spend some quiet time with a strange story that unfolds calmly and without rushing to conclusions. The first unusual clip surfaced late one evening, when most of the staff had already left an international space data analysis center. A US-based imagery analyst named Max Carter was reviewing archived video streams from Mars probes, expecting the usual panoramas of dust, rock, and habitat domes. Instead, a grainy image flickered on his screen. A red plane under a low sun. The familiar white hemispheres of the official colony. And off to the side, another dome that did not fit the layout. Two groups of figures in pressurized suits were moving across the ground. Then, in rapid flashes that looked like brief bursts of light, something happened. One figure in standard white gear dropped to the surface. Another moved toward it and collapsed moments later. Dust rose, the camera jolted, and the frame froze on a section of a dark dome wall. Across it, uneven letters were visible, clearly formed despite the distortion. We were written off. Seconds later, the image washed out in white noise. Telemetry cut. The file ended with a routine system note about signal loss. Max sat motionless for nearly a minute, listening to his own heartbeat. Formally, it was just another corrupted clip misfiled in an archive. In practice, it suggested that something was happening on Mars that never appeared in official briefings. From that night on, the word habitat stopped feeling like a neutral engineering term. A few days before finding the video, Max had already noticed something odd in a routine data packet that most colleagues would have ignored. Among standard entries labeled Habitat 1 and Habitat 2, a different line appeared. Habitat 8, Service Corridor. Official plans accounted for 6 domes, with vague discussions about a 7th. There was no mention of an 8th. Out of habit, Max checked the coordinates through shared orbital imagery databases. Every query returned the same result: a gray placeholder. Data temporarily unavailable. He expanded the search to open archives from multiple international missions. Satellite paths appeared to bend around the same area. Images were overexposed, clipped, or flagged as unusable for technical reasons. He sent a few carefully worded messages to engineers he knew abroad, avoiding specific coordinates. Most replies were jokes or links to academic papers. One American navigation specialist, however, responded privately. The message contained only 2 sentences. That sector is restricted. If you want to keep your job, do not ask about it through official channels. The account went offline for weeks afterward. Realizing he could not pursue this alone, Max contacted a former classmate, Elena, now working with a European small satellite consortium. In an informal encrypted chat, he shared excerpts from the logs and screenshots from the imagery database. Elena admitted that a mysterious Dome 8 also appeared on one of their internal object lists, marked as an area with limited access. Through her, a French attitude control specialist and a Japanese image processing engineer joined the conversation. The small group began referring to itself, half-jokingly, as the Martian Shadow. They understood that formal requests would lead nowhere. Any direct inquiry into the restricted sector would only draw unwanted attention. Eventually, they chose a path that remained technically legal. They proposed a microprobe mission with a benign scientific goal: the study of Martian dust activity. The documentation listed standard experiments. Quietly, Max added a conditional maneuver to the onboard software. If the probe detected what it classified as anomalous dust behavior, it would adjust its trajectory, passing directly over the coordinates consistently labeled as unavailable. Compared to major missions, the probe was modest. A few dozen pounds. A budget small enough to escape scrutiny. A student-led project reviewed by committees accustomed to approving harmless academic hardware. Officially, it was just another cooperative experiment. Launch day arrived during a shared window on an international rocket. Max watched the feed from a dim office, telemetry scrolling across his screen. The vehicle lifted off, flames vanished into the sky, and status indicators turned green. To everyone else, it was a routine example of multinational collaboration. To 4 people in an encrypted chat, it felt like a quiet breach of an invisible boundary. Months passed slowly. The probe corrected its course, following precise calculations. The team went about their regular work, pretending the project was just another professional task. Each notification marking a trajectory milestone carried a reminder. When the probe reached the silent sector, there would be no undoing what followed. At last, Elena sent a brief message. The probe was ready for its maneuver phase. The overpass would occur at night for Max, at different hours for the others. Terminals lit up in separate time zones. Orbital maps glowed on one screen. Signal graphs trembled on another. Max watched raw telemetry and the feed from the probe's single wide-angle camera. According to the programmed logic, the software flagged elevated dust activity nearby. To mission control, it looked like a routine response. The system adjusted course, allowing the probe to drift over an area marked in databases as temporarily unavailable. Within the Martian shadow, everyone knew the dust explanation was only a cover. The first image appeared. Red terrain stretched below. Off to one side stood the familiar white domes of the official settlement, ringed with solar arrays. Telemetry confirmed the probe was flying over a region where no structures were supposed to exist. A few miles later, the view changed. A low, flattened dome entered the frame. Black, almost charred in appearance, lacking the modular features seen on other habitats. Its surface reflected almost no light, making it look like a void pressed into the planet. The surrounding ground was unnaturally clean. No farming equipment, no antenna fields. The access route from the main colony ended well short of the structure, leaving a wide buffer of untouched soil. Across continents, the 4 engineers reached the same conclusion. This was not a test module or an unfinished build. Nothing about it suggested habitation. Its shape and isolation felt more like containment than shelter. Max switched the camera to video mode and commanded the lowest pass the trajectory allowed. Figures became visible near the entrance. On one side stood people in standard white suits, marked with familiar insignia. On the other, a second group wore dark, angular suits without any visible identification. They faced each other across a stretch of empty ground. What followed lasted only seconds. At first, Max thought a piece of equipment had caught the light. Then the flash repeated. Dust erupted from near one of the white-suited figures, who fell and did not rise. Another moved forward and collapsed moments later. The movements were abrupt, uncoordinated, and disturbingly final. Whatever the flashes represented, they did not resemble training exercises. The probe continued recording, following its automated sequence. At one point, the camera tilted sharply and focused on the dome wall. That was when the words became visible. Rough, uneven letters etched into the dark surface. We were written off. The strokes looked hurried, as if carved through gloves or under pressure. Almost immediately, heavy interference filled the frame. A shape resembling a rotating optical unit flickered at the edge of the image. The signal weakened. The feed dissolved into static. Telemetry flagged suspected external interference. The probe went silent. The official mission report was released a week later. It cited unexpected conditions in the upper Martian atmosphere, leading to electronic failure and loss of the experiment. The dust survey was mentioned briefly. The restricted sector was not mentioned at all. In internal meetings, the probe was praised as a valuable learning experience. The case was closed. For Max and the others, it was not. They had saved fragments of video and telemetry before the loss. The Japanese engineer processed the footage, stabilizing frames and pulling detail from noise. Elena printed still images and stored them offline. The French specialist distributed encrypted backups across several servers. What they lacked was any idea of what to do next. Consequences followed quietly. The Japanese engineer was removed from projects without explanation. Days later, his professional accounts vanished. A short news item mentioned his death in a traffic accident. After that, Elena grew cautious, warning Max that some subjects were dangerous even without radiation or vacuum. Max eventually agreed to an anonymous interview with an independent filmmaker. No names, no institutions, just blurred footage and the words on the wall. The video circulated briefly, dismissed by many as fabrication or clever editing. Others treated it as a leak. Around the same time, official Mars maps were updated. The previously blank square was shaded slightly darker, labeled with a neutral phrase, "Data temporarily unavailable." On the surface, the story ended there. The probe remained listed as lost to environmental factors. No investigation followed. The Martian shadow never officially existed. Yet somewhere on Mars, in a sector that orbital cameras consistently avoided, there may still be people working, or something else entirely. And on the wall of a dark structure far from the approved domes, someone once wrote a message meant to be seen, if only for a few seconds, before the sky was blinded again.